And hello and welcome to Hollywood Blockbusters. I am your host, Joe Hollywood. And once again, I'm joined by Imaginos Pete
Hey, hey.
and Andrew Walker.
Hello.
Welcome, guys. And on our last podcast, we talked about movies that we're anticipating in 2025, and a list that's been circulating on social media pretty much lists all reboots, remakes, sequels, and prequels. There are going to be a lot of them in 2025.
Yeah.
Some could be good. Most just don't appeal to me. But that is something we've been dealing with as movie buffs for a long, long time. And growing up in the 70s and 80s, I lived through some of the worst sequels that you could imagine. Just awful. You know, a movie makes a lot of money like Jaws, and then they follow it up with Jaws 2 and Jaws 3D. And I seem to have forgotten, I think there was a Jaws 4, maybe, that had Michael Caine in it or something. I don't know.
We're just opening all the old wounds, aren't we?
I know. So, that's the way the studios worked. If they had a property that made a lot of money, they would try to get a sequel in as quickly as possible. And in their mind, they didn't necessarily need any of the same writers or actors or anything. Let's just take that title and put a 2 at the end of it, and let's get it in the theaters. And it may or may not have been a good movie, but for the most part, a lot of these sequels made money despite the fact that they weren't very good. And it was just easy money for these studios that would allow them to do more, high-end, high-profile stuff. And so, yeah, I saw a lot of garbage in the theaters growing up. But every once in a while, we'd get a sequel that was a gem, maybe a sequel that was even better than its predecessor. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today, are some of our favorite sequels, prequels, and a little bit later reboots and remakes and that sort of thing. So
I appreciate you trying to put a positive spin on this topic, considering that 99% of everything that you said is not going to end up well.
Yeah, I'm not doing
Reboots,
a great job
remakes,
of building up
sequels,
this positive.
spin-offs. And you're just like, we're going to focus on the positive. I'm like, we're really digging.
People are tuning out. Jaws 3.
Oh, they probably want to see, whoa, no, positives. Find me some, sir.
Now, I'm going to throw out, in my opinion, what I think is one of the greatest sequels ever made. And I'm curious to get you guys to chime in on your favorite sequels ever made. But imagine, being 10 years old and Star Wars comes out and it changes my life. And I would buy the comics and the toys and the spaceships, and that's all I did. I mean, my mother wouldn't even have to check on me because I would just be quiet in my room just playing with the action figures and stuff, and it just dominated my childhood. And then imagine, a few years later, I'm 12 years old, going on 13, and all of a sudden you start hearing rumblings of Star Wars 2, and you're like, oh my God. And then you see the trailer for The Empire Strikes Back, and it's what's fascinating is you have most of the same actors come back, but the movie just had a different look, a different feel. It wasn't necessarily more of the same. It was taking what was familiar about Star Wars and incorporating it into the sequel. And one of the things that I think the Empire Strikes Back benefited from was a different director.
Yes.
Even though George Lucas, is part of his vision and based on the characters that he created, a different director came in named Irvin Kershner.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
Who took the reins of that. And what did he direct? There was something else he had directed before that. There's a couple of things. But apparently he was a mentor to George Lucas, and Lucas brought him in. And the movie just had a different feel with these new creatures like Tauntauns, and all of a sudden we started seeing like different types of stormtroopers, like the Snow Trooper, and then of course the moment we had all been waiting for is Luke and Darth Vader go toe to toe, and we see a lightsaber duel that made the Obi-Wan lightsaber duel look like two kids playing with wrapping paper tubes. It was fantastic. Now, I'll always have a special place in my heart for the original Star Wars because that's where it all started. But a lot of people say that The Empire Strikes Back surpassed Star Wars in
Yes.
depth and drama, and it wasn't necessarily kid stuff. This was, there were some graphic moments like slicing open the belly of a tauntaun to get Luke warm. That wasn't necessarily geared toward kids, and I think that's the appeal of those movies, is that they weren't necessarily made for kids. Like, if you were a parent and you dragged your kid to a theater to see Star Wars or The Empire Strikes Back, you were as entertained as your child was. I remember my mom really enjoying those movies when we went to go see them for the first time.
It had all the merchandising appeal. You got new toys, so on an executive level, you were happy about that. And I appreciate the fact that your mom. I wonder if your mom was ever saying, "Joe, just go outside and do some vandalism. Like, you don't have to stay at home. Are you sure there's nothing you want to do?"
No, she took us to the movie theater a lot, and I'm sure that she enjoyed films as much as I did as a kid. And
Yeah.
I think I've said on this podcast before that some of the earliest movies I have memories of seeing are like The Godfather and the James Bond movies. Like, I was seeing this stuff when I was 5 and 6 years old. So, I got that, I think, from my parents, my love of movies. And so my mom, I think, enjoyed going to the theater as much as the kids did. And I just remember seeing, later when I was in my teens, we'd go see a movie like Cannonball Run. And I would be like, I don't want to sit with my mom. And I would go sit in a different part of the theater, but I can hear her laughing hysterically above everybody else. So she enjoyed taking us to these films. And The Empire Strikes Back was just something else. And then, of course, 3 years later, they followed up with Return of the Jedi, which I enjoy, but that felt more like it was geared toward kids, even though it did have some dramatic elements and stuff. But now you got Ewoks running around, and every creature looked like something from the Muppet Labs,
Especially in Jabba's palace.
Yeah, Jabba's palace and the Rancor and all that stuff. They were clear these were all like Muppets. And I enjoy Return of the Jedi, but there's something about The Empire Strikes Back.
He didn't get his original director.
Yeah.
The VGA kind of was messing with him, and so he didn't get his original guy. Otherwise, it might have turned out differently.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows?
Who did he want originally?
Steven.
For the third one?
But because
wow.
George Lucas has this way of always putting his credits at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
And the DGA was like, no, you got to put it in the front like every other movie. And so they gave him a mulligan on Star Wars. They fined him heavily, and they threatened to go after Kirshner.
Whoa!
And so he said, "All right, I pay the $250,000 fine. I'm quitting the guild. I'm out. F you, F everybody. I'm out."
Yeah.
And Mike drops and walks out. Comes back and wants to make the movie. Goes to Steven's like, "I want Steven doing it." They're like, "Oh, well, he's a DGA member. You can't have him."
Yeah.
Wow.
Now the weird thing about, I know we're veering off topic a little bit here, but the weird thing about this argument over credits is that in the classic films, you had the credits before the film, and then the movie would just end with the end, or maybe a short list of the cast. And the people who worked so hard on that film didn't get the recognition. You only got some of the key cast members and some of the the background people. And so imagine working on these films and not seeing your name. What George Lucas did is included everybody in those end credits.
Yeah.
So why would the DGA be opposed to that, giving everyone their proper credit?
Well, my theory is like TV and film. In TV, the director's here. In movies, it's the director and everybody else.
Yeah, yeah. So what do you guys, did you see Star Wars first, then Empire Strikes Back? Or how
Yes.
did you guys experience it? And how would you compare and contrast Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back? Nick, we'll start with you.
I was lucky, despite not being born when Star Wars came out. I was fortunate to watch them in order, and I enjoyed Empire Strikes Back a lot more than Star Wars. I appreciated it even more when I got into the 90s when I was a teenager because, and I think Kirshner talks about this, it's the character development. Like, you get more into what's going on with Luke, and I think Kirshner even mentions this in one of those behind-the-scene documentaries. There's more. I want to know what was making Luke tick.
Mm-hmm.
The Leia and Solo banter back and forth, and you're like, oh wow, okay, I guess despite that weird kiss in the there's something here. Okay,
Yeah, there's a rivalry there.
Yeah, let's pull on that thread, and then the big Vader and Luke thing. And
big reveal, one of the biggest twists in movie history.
Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father?
He told me enough. He told me you killed him.
No. I am your father.
One of the all-time great movie moments.
And I love the behind the scenes on that because apparently they kept that as much of a secret as possible. Only James Earl Jones knew when he was reading the dialogue.
Yeah.
And then they told Mark Hamill on set that day because originally it was supposed to be, I think they said, no, Obi-Wan killed your father.
Yeah,
and he was
yeah.
like, no, not possible. Then when they were like, what?
Yeah. And, you know, the interesting thing is because The Empire Strikes Back is the middle part of a trilogy, usually that Act 2, in any movie that you watch, Act 2 usually takes a dark twist.
Yep.
And when you think about it, most of The Empire Strikes Back is that dark twist. Luke gets his ass kicked throughout the movie. First by the Wampa getting knocked off the Tauntaun. He gets his ass kicked by Darth Vader.
And his snowspeeder gets shot down.
Yeah.
And he crashes on Yoda's planet.
Yeah, and then, you know, foregoes the training, and Yoda's like, we're not done here yet. And he's like, I got to go. And so he's like a failure throughout Act 2, and that helps shape his character on his journey into the third act. And so the one thing I do remember seeing it in theaters was the cliffhanger ending. Like, I thought the movie was just getting good. Like, all right, we're all going to go rendezvous on Tatooine and save Han. And I'm like, all right. Dun, 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 the end credits, and I'm like, what the hell is going on?
I mean, did you not realize it was a 2-hour movie? I mean, come on, Joe.
They would have fit it all in 4 hours
This
today.
wasn't intermission. I mean, if they said intermission like in the old school days, you could have gotten away with that.
I was genuinely shocked when the credits started playing, and I'm like, there's a whole thing left. And at the time, we had to wait 3 years for Return of the Jedi. That's torture. Keep in mind, I saw Star Wars when I was 10 years old, not quite 11. I didn't see Return of the Jedi till I was like 16 going on 17. That's crazy, making us wait all that time.
Yeah.
So, Andrew, your memories of Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back?
Yeah, I've mentioned this before on here. I saw Empire Strikes Back first because at the time we didn't have cable, and it was either my mom or dad recorded it on. It's prime time.
Yeah. On network TV.
Yeah. Must have been 89. I think I was 5 when and I loved it. But watching that and with that ending and me thinking this is all it was until my dad told me, no, there's other parts. There's a one before and one after. So I don't know, but out of the original trilogy, Empire is still my favorite. But I don't know if it's because I saw that first, or if, like a lot of people say, it's objectively the best movie out of the 3.
Yeah.
So, and going back and then watching the first one, where Darth Vader is more of just kind of like a thug. You know, he don't really know much about him. He doesn't hardly have any dialogue. It's like, it's kind of weird watching Out of Order. But, and I know you guys are going to hate me for saying this, but I think it's the same thing with The Last Jedi compared to The Force Awakens. The Force Awakens was a shot-for-shot remake of.
No, I don't disagree. I have a lot of thoughts on the new trilogy.
And I like The Force Awakens a lot, but I also like The Last Jedi because it, like The Empire Strikes Back, it went in a completely different direction. It threw some curveballs in there. Now, I know everyone didn't agree on the story arc of it, and I get that. But still, it's the same idea of
the middle chapter being the dark.
The middle chapter and doing something different than what was just what you were just shown. So yeah,
I'm not a fan of the more recent sequels. I
Rise
thought
of Skywalker was awful.
They were a big middle finger to people who've spent their life in movie theaters watching these Star Wars movies. And
even Force Awakens, you feel that way about?
Well, I enjoyed Force Awakens when it came out. I thought of all the Star Wars movies, I thought it was the best acted film in the entire franchise, actually.
Yeah.
And so I enjoyed it at the time, but I feel like its legacy was tarnished by the sequels where they started giving superpowers to Jedi that weren't introduced in the previous movies. And they're like, what? Jedi can do what now? They can teleport themselves across long distances? Where did this come from? And it reminds me of like the Superman movies where it's like, now he's got a cold breath, then he's got heat vision.
He can rebuild the Great Wall of China with his eye beams.
Yeah, and I'm like, wait a second, where's all this coming from?
But new force powers were introduced in Return of the Jedi with the Emperor, with the
force lightning and stuff. Yeah,
but that's dark side power.
But and that's George Lucas revealing this for the Last Jedi and stuff. This is Rian Johnson introducing this stuff, and he just
I will go to my
up.
grave on this, and I have to back Andrew on this. I don't think Rian Johnson had full control of that movie.
No,
because you can't go from writing that and then doing Knives Out.
Yeah,
there wasn't like a 2-year hiatus.
Yeah.
He went literally from the marketing and promotion of, and then finishing Knives Out, which is brilliant.
Yeah,
I said, how does that happen?
Yep.
Yeah,
that has Disney suits written all over it.
Yeah,
but he fell on the sword for it. He's like, oh, it's written, produced, and directed. I'm like, all right, if you wear the triple hat on that.
Yeah. And the other thing that bugged me, and who directed the first one? It was J.J. Abrams. One thing that bugged me, we talk a lot about fan service on this podcast, and the one thing that I felt like they just really dropped the ball with was getting all of those original actors on screen together.
Oh,
other than Luke force projecting himself to have a conversation with Leia, they never all appeared on screen together, which I thought was a huge, huge mistake. Like, how do you not you get all these actors to sign on and then you don't put them on screen together? And that was my biggest complaint with The Force Awakens is we don't see Luke, who's in the opening credits. Mark Hamill, we don't see him until the last 30 seconds of the movie.
Sure.
That's crazy to me. And then
J.J. Abrams said they tried a bunch of different avenues of introducing Luke earlier in the movie, and he said nothing worked.
Yeah.
So I don't know what they could have done differently, but that's just what he said.
J.J. Abrams has, I don't know, when the mouse got the rights to it and they wanted to make a movie, I was like, just take your time, wait. You have it now. It's yours.
Yeah.
It's not going anywhere. Don't rush something out there. And then they did it. And like Andrew was saying, when I was watching, I was like, oh, okay. Oh, another empire, another rebellion. But there's an existing government. Oh, God.
And another Death Star.
Are we doing
But
another,
it's a planet now.
But it's a planet
now.
now.
It's 100 times bigger
than the other one. Yeah.
And I was like, all right. And then she's on a desert planet. She's the main character looking into the twin suns again, wondering what's going on.
Exactly like Tatooine, but it's Jakku.
Yeah, and then I see this on social media all the time where people use this line as an example of poor writing, but I always see this when people say somehow Emperor Palpatine has returned, and it's like that's your out, that's your excuse.
I audibly sighed.
Yeah,
I had that.
Yeah.
Some people look back at me because it says in the crowd somehow Palpatine. I'm like, oh wow, we're just like, oh.
That probably would have benefited from a different director. I have a third director, not Rian Johnson or JJ, come in.
It was the third director, but then JJ had to come in and redo it.
Oh, he did. He came in and fixed
was
things.
That the
It was
one?
the Jurassic World guy.
Colin Trevorrow.
Colin Trevorrow.
That's right.
And they were like more than 50% into the movie, and then they were like, nah, something's not right. Out. And then JJ comes in to finish it off. I'm like, yeah, well, this will, what could go wrong?
Yeah,
Everything.
and it was a
that's
mess, and it's painfully obvious that those sequels didn't have an overall arc planned out because you introduce Finn in Force Awakens, and then he's like eased out of the films, the next two films. If I was John Boyega, I'd be like, what the hell was that?
They turned him into pure comic relief. It was
Yeah.
almost tropish.
They could have made him the star of this trilogy and reveal that everyone has inert force powers and that maybe Finn had these force powers that he unlocks. They could have taken that character and really done something amazing with him, and then they wrote him out. Like, that's awful.
Did we all see them in I saw all three in theaters.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
I had, but Joe, and despite what we say, I had the audience clapping. There was significant parts of the audience that was clapping in theater, and I said, "Oh, you know what that made me think? This is their Star Wars now." I got off.
Yeah.
My bus stop was earlier, this now is yours.
Mm-hmm.
And if
Well-
this is what you guys enjoy, then I'm going to tip my hat and
Yeah.
go
Well-
back to my time.
I hear that from people in their 20s and 30s that, when I'm like, my Star Wars was the original trilogy, they're like, well, my Star Wars was the Phantom Menace. I'm like, really? And I didn't necessarily hate those movies, but I thought they were too overly explanatory. Like in the Phantom Menace, it's like, oh, there's a trade blockade and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what kid is going to give a crap about a trade blockade?
What adult's going to give it? I don't want to watch the Senate. I can go watch C-SPAN.
Right. So I don't hate them, but unlike the original trilogy, I don't really watch them over and over and over again. It's like, if they're your Star Wars, that's great. They're not my Star Wars. And then the next trilogy, I think I own The Force Awakens on DVD, but I remember sitting in the theater for The Last Jedi and what was the other one? Rise of Skywalker. I remember sitting in the theater going, I can't believe I hate these Star Wars movies. Like, I was aware of the fact as I was watching them that I was hating them. As
And
they
yet
played
there
out.
was audience around you clapping and cheering,
Yeah.
and they were excited. They were like, yeah, they saw the little horses riding on Rise of Skywalker. I'm like, oh, the cavalry's literally here. I did not expect that. Yay.
Yeah. Now, I will say that Rogue One had a lot of elements that those sequels should have had. Rogue One was a lot of fun.
Yes.
Even though we knew that it wasn't going to turn out well for our heroes, but it had a lot of that magic and fun that the
You
original
cared about the
trilogy had.
characters. I cared about
Yeah.
them. You're right. I
So-
looked and I was like, I know how this is going to end.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So after the original trilogy, Rogue One is actually my favorite Star Wars movie.
I think I might have to agree with you on that, Joe.
Yeah.
It is. I can't think of anything about that movie that I don't like.
Right, exactly.
Technically, it's beautiful, great.
Yeah.
The acting is great. The characters are pretty developed.
Yeah.
I mean, even the CGI Moff Tarkin and Leia. At the end,
Yeah.
that
The
whatever.
Leia one was more jarring than the Tarkin one, I felt.
I
Yeah.
think so. But still, I mean, it was cool. At least they brought him back for a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the deep fake technology wasn't readily available to the filmmakers at the time, so they had to sort of computer animate the likenesses of those two actors, and it didn't fully work for me. I've seen people since use that deep fake technology to redo those scenes,
Yeah.
and they're jaw dropping. And then, of course, when the Mandalorian was on the Disney Channel, when Luke Skywalker is like training with Baby Yoda Grogu, they used that deep fake technology on the actor playing a young Mark Hamill, and I'm like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
This is the future of filmmaking. Like, if you want to do a new Marilyn Monroe film, it's possible now with this technology. So,
Joe, remind me, did you watch Andor, the TV series?
I did, and I hated it. Hated
Really?
everything about it. Yeah.
Oh man, I loved it.
Yeah. I enjoy. I called it grown folk Star Wars.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hated Andor. I hated the Acolyte even more.
Yeah.
And I
Acolyte
haven't
wasn't
even
good.
Acolyte was a
bothered with this new series with the kids.
It's
in it.
Joe, it's really good. Have you watched any of it?
I haven't had a chance to see Skeleton Crew yet.
It,
I just
Joe,
have no interest.
it will remind you of like E.T., Goonies, like it'll remind you of early Spielberg.
Yeah.
I'll give you my my Disney password. Hopefully Disney's not listening.
don't say that. No, don't.
But it's I can see why you didn't like the Acolyte. I didn't care much for it either. I disagree with on Andor, but I think we would see similarly.
I
on
enjoyed
Skeleton
parts.
Crew.
I enjoyed parts of Mandalorian and
Oh, yeah,
and Ahsoka.
Oh, I loved Mandalorian. I loved Book of
Ahsoka
Boba Fett.
yeah.
Did you see Ahsoka?
I loved Ahsoka. Yeah,
Yeah.
And I
Ahsoka
wasn't
was
a
kind
big.
of
The interesting thing about that is I wasn't a huge Clone Wars fan. The animated series.
Yeah, I never watched.
So I enjoyed Ahsoka despite not really being a religious viewer of the TV series, but I enjoyed it. Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
The ending of Ahsoka was kind of And my thing with the movies, Solo was a movie that nobody asked for, but I said, okay, if you're going to make it because you need to satisfy some quota, hit the check marks. Show me how you get the Falcon. Show me how you meet Chewie. Do the
It all
Kessel
felt
Spice
so
run.
deliberate.
Yeah,
though.
I didn't ask for it. I didn't need it.
doing-
I
yeah.
actually like the mystery of my.
I know. Do we need the Kessel Run explained? Blah blah blah. And it's funny. Disney basically said, and like Kathleen Kennedy, after the failure of the Han Solo movie, they're like, okay, we learned a lesson not to recast any of the original trilogy characters. And I'm like, you could have asked me and saved yourself millions of dollars. I would have said, don't recast Han Solo. Don't do it. It's sacred. It's taboo to touch. And they did it and learned an expensive lesson. It was a box office disaster.
And one thing I will say is that they're in a tough bind because you don't spend billions of dollars and then not use the property.
Yeah.
So, for instance, I agree. I'd rather not. I don't care about young Solo, young Luke, young Leia. I really don't.
Yeah.
But use that to go find other characters.
Yeah.
But would you mind seeing a young Indiana Jones?
Possibly. I mean, they
They should
dabbled in it.
They should make a TV series about
Yeah.
it 35 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they had River Phoenix play a young Indiana Jones at the start of The Last Crusade, and he was brilliant in it.
Yep.
One could only wonder what if he had not died young.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think I can live with a young,
Because
further
I don't want to
adventures.
see an 80-year-old geriatric Indy struggling with
Too late.
sciatica and arthritis, and I'm like, this is not my guy. Don't do this.
If you see Dial of Destiny, you pretty much got an 80-year-old.
Yeah, I know, and
yeah.
we're just ripping up scabs, aren't we? In this podcast, it's just all that therapy out the window. Lovely.
Well, we spent almost a half hour on Star Wars, so this is going to be an 8-hour-long podcast as we get through this. So let's talk about Indiana Jones since you brought it up. Again, I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark in the theater when it came out, and it's like, oh, my God, Han Solo is in this new movie. I'm like, entertain me. And was blown away. Blown away by this movie. Like, oh, my God, he could do other things. And so imagine the excitement when they announced Indiana Jones 2, which they didn't make clear that Temple of Doom was actually set before the events of Raiders of the Lost Ark, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But I remember going into the theater watching Temple of Doom and not liking it. Like, it's loud. It's a mess. What are these Shankara stones or whatever? Like, the first movie, we had the Ark of the Covenant. Now we got these rocks with white lines on it. Like, what the hell is this? And so I didn't care much for Temple of Doom. And then in 1989, I was going through a lot of things. My mother passed away, and The Last Crusade had come out, and I just totally missed it. I just whiffed on The Last Crusade because there's all this stuff going on in my life. And so it wasn't until it was released on video where my cousin said, hey, have you seen Last Crusade? I said, no, I have not. She said, let's pop it in. And I was like, oh, my God, this is one of the greatest movies I've ever seen in my life.
Yes.
The Last Crusade is a masterpiece.
Yep.
And the coup is that they cast Sean Connery, which
Yeah.
kind of brings full circle because the whole original idea behind Indiana Jones is that Spielberg wanted to do a James Bond film. And
That's right.
the Broccolis, who owned James Bond at the time, were like, well, we're not interested in you doing a James Bond film. And Lucas, laying on the beach with Spielberg, said, I got something better than James Bond.
Yep.
So by the time The Last Crusade rolls around, they cast Sean Connery as Indy's dad. That's brilliant. That's the stars aligning and making this happen. And it's one of my all-time favorite movies. The Last Crusade was just brilliant.
Was it you, Andrew, was saying that he's 11 years older than Harrison Ford? He's like,
In
"I'm
real
your
life,
dad."
there's no way in real life they could be fathers.
Oh,
and
yeah.
son.
Yeah, that happens a lot in Hollywood.
I'm playing your father.
Junior. So The Last Crusade made up for the disappointment of Temple of Doom. I don't hate Temple of Doom. I just don't.
It had comedic
necessarily
moments in it.
watch
I like that. But as far as story-wise, I think it's the weakest of the three.
Well, the explanation that I've read is that both Spielberg and Lucas apparently were going through divorces or something around the time, and so that was reflected in the darkness of the film. I mean, there's a scene of a man's heart getting ripped out of his chest.
Yeah.
You don't have
And
to
catching on fire.
You don't need to see a therapist to know what that symbolizes, And so, the monkey brains and all that stuff, I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't ask for this.
Right.
Yeah, that was pretty weird.
Yeah. And then,
that was the thing. A lot of people would ask Indians, "Do you guys eat all that stuff?" I know cows are sacred, but no, we don't do that.
yeah. And so then we wait a decade or two for the next installment of Indiana Jones, and they do the Crystal Skull, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And again,
What's that movie?
Kingdom of the Crystal. No, it's pops and buzzes. It's not registering.
No, I've just blocked it out. I don't know what's going on.
It was another experience of me sitting in a movie theater where I'm going, this is a piece of garbage. I mean, I realized it as I was watching it, how horrific this movie was, from the Indiana Jones trying to survive a nuclear blast in a refrigerator to the aliens at the end, a UFO coming out of the earth. And it's like, this is not Indiana Jones. And then just to add, more to it is that the crystal skulls that they were chasing in this movie were known, proven hoaxes. That every crystal skull that had ever been made were made by modern methods and were proven hoaxes. And still, Spielberg was like, oh, we can build a movie around this. So I hated everything about Crystal Skull, including the casting of Shia LaBeouf, insinuating that he was Indiana Jones' kid and that he was going to be the successor to the franchise, which alienated me. And then when they get around to doing Dial of Destiny, they're like, what happened to what was his name? Mutt. And they're like, oh, he died.
Vietnam,
oh, okay.
Yeah.
They were like, we're not going to bring him back for this one. And I was like, thank God.
Joe, I want to thank you for undoing all my Groupon therapy. I know I got it through Groupon, but just like that.
Did you see Dial of Destiny?
Yes, I did, because we had to talk about it.
I did not hate it. I thought it was an odd movie, and it's a flawed movie.
I hated it.
If I was to rank movies, I would rank it above Crystal Skull.
Yeah,
I think Crystal Skull is one of the worst movies I've ever seen. Yeah. But Dial of Destiny is second worst, at least in that franchise.
I'm trying not to even. My third best movie is The Golden Circle, the video game that just came out.
If you people watch are raving about it.
If you just watch the cutscenes, if someone's going to organize into a movie and play it, I'm going to watch that. It'll be about a 3.5-hour movie, so I'll make myself an intermission.
Yeah.
But there's someone that because it's in a first-person perspective, and then there's the natural cutscenes that are more like cinematic.
Yeah.
So if someone plays it out and does it exactly right, like on one take, kind of, you could watch that movie because the voice actor they got for that is fantastic. I actually thought they just got Harrison's voice and then de-aged it.
Yeah, or you got that AI technology.
Yeah, but apparently they got an actual great voice actor who came really close, and then they just kind of like cleaned up the edges on it, and it's amazing.
You know who does a great Harrison Ford? Mark Hamill. Mark Hamill can do Harrison Ford, and it's uncanny. It's really amazing.
Yeah.
So
I'd put a video game as above than those other two movies that you mentioned, which I will not acknowledge.
But I'm open to any TV series. I would love to see an animated TV series. That would be
cool because you wouldn't have to worry about Harrison Ford.
Exactly.
I saw Dial of Destiny. I think it was opening night. It's one of those movies like I talked about before with like Deadpool and Wolverine or Beetlejuice. It was fun watching it in a theater with. I went with my sister, parents, and brother-in-law because it was Alexa's birthday, so she wanted to see it for her birthday. And it was fun watching it in a packed theater. You know, I could tell everyone enjoyed it. But in the grand scheme of things, it's not great. It doesn't compare to Raiders or Last Crusade.
Yeah.
But I was kind of disappointed because James Mangold directed that, and he's a good director. He did Ford vs. Ferrari, Walk the Line, the new Bob Dylan movie, which was really good.
Yeah. And
he's going to be doing a Old Republic Star Wars movie.
Interesting. All right.
So we'll see.
I'm hoping because I think what happened is since obviously it was Indiana Jones is a Disney franchise, right? So I'm sure the executives had a lot more say in it, and I hope they don't do that to his new Old Republic
because
movie.
You can't, like I said, you can't do Ford versus Ferrari, all these great dramatic movies, and then all of a sudden you get a bigger budget, they throw you into this franchise, and then
Yeah.
oh my God, the diaper's full.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the problems I had with Dial of Destiny is, they tried to de-age Harrison Ford using CGI, and sometimes there were like weird glitches where it looked like his face was coming off, which was startling. But then they didn't bother to de-age his voice, so you hear like an old man Harrison Ford voice coming out of a de-aged face, and I'm like, guys, this isn't done yet. The turkey's not done yet. Put it back in the oven for a little while.
I'm just gonna grate like this. I'm like, that is not how he sounded in Raiders, buddy. I hate to say it to you.
So
That's not a voice that's gonna get the ladies to go, oh, I'm gonna get with that guy.
That's right. All right, I'm going to kind of go down this list I have here, not necessarily in any sort of order. I'm just going to throw out some of my favorite sequels. So, again, another movie experience growing up in the 70s and 80s was after Star Wars was such a huge success. The people who own the rights to Star Trek were like, we need to jump on that bandwagon.
Mm-hmm.
And they released Star Trek the Motion Picture, which isn't necessarily a bad movie by any means, but there was zero action in this film. It's just the hunt for this, I guess you would say, artificial intelligence that was created by the Voyager spacecraft or whatever. And the credits are rolling, and you're like, what did I just see?
Yeah.
Where's the space battles? Where's the gun battles? And so they were like, okay, we need to add an element to these Star Trek movies that not only emulates what we saw in Star Wars, but more accurately captures what people watched on television. So what do they follow up the motion picture with? The Wrath of Khan, which is a freaking brilliant movie on its own. It's a great sequel with your over-the-top Ricardo Montalban and an over-the-top William Shatner and dramatic elements involving Spock. And you're like, where was this the first time around? This is the movie you should have made last time. And it was just great.
It kicked off a mini trilogy because 2, 3, and 4 are all connected.
Yeah,
and you can
yeah.
watch them all and be like, oh, wow, this is actually kind of entertaining.
Yeah. Now, most people agree that the odd Star Trek movies are bad. The even-numbered Star Trek movies are good, even though some of those odd-numbered movies have their fans. But I kind of get it. Like, I loved the voyage home where they come to Earth to save the whales. And there were some really funny moments, double dumbass to you two or whatever that Kirk says to the guy honking at him. That was a lot of fun and not, because it takes place on Earth throughout most of the film, not a whole lot of special effects and fantasy in it, but it was a lot of fun, like seeing these characters in a modern day at the time, San Francisco. And
I think he did a little too much
really
LDS.
good. What's that?
He did a little too much LDS.
What?
LDS.
Yeah.
Latter-day Saints Church.
And then, like, was it Scotty? Did Scotty invent, like, the glass or something? Like,
1 inch aluminum. One inch
like
aluminum.
clear aluminum and stuff. And,
Transparent aluminum, yeah.
Yeah, and he's, like, inventing things. I'm like, what the hell happened to the Prime Directive? That went right out the window.
Bones is trying to tell him that. He's like, well, how do you know he didn't invent the bloody thing? I said, well, I don't know, Scotty. Looks like you're just putting your thumb on the scale. That's a hell of a reason just to throw out that, well, how do you know he didn't invent it? I don't know. I mean, I don't remember him.
Yeah.
In any history.
And then, of course, as they continue to churn out these movies, you had The Next Generation on television. So it was an eventuality that they were going to have to pass the baton on to Captain Jean-Luc Picard and cast and crew. And then, of course, there had to be like the crossover moments where Picard meets Kirk on screen.
And that's movie 7.
Yeah. So they transitioned again. It was fan service to get those two. You really had to use a hammer to really make those two appear on screen together. But that's what the fans wanted. And so one of my favorite Star Trek movies was First Contact. I watched First Contact again about a year ago, and I'm like, this is great. That's not just good; it's great. And so some of those Next Generation movies were pretty darn entertaining too.
I think that was the only one that was entertaining for me, the First Contact. Because I actually like this. Then you actually got to see the Captain Ahab moments in Picard. I'm like, man, you might need
Oh,
some
as
therapy.
white whale, yeah.
Like after
that's
Woodard
great.
calls him on it, it's like, I think you have to go get your white whale. I'm like,
Yeah, and the bored queen. I'm like, I shouldn't be as attracted to her as I am. Like, what the hell is going on here? And that's how she gets you, I guess.
yeah.
But that was a lot of fun, and then of course, since we're talking about reboots, you got the J.J. Abrams reboot of Star Trek, which again I enjoyed. I thought Chris Pine did a nice job of not necessarily impersonating William Shatner, but just sort of capturing his essence and manner of speaking and movements and stuff. And so I thought the reboot was pretty darn entertaining. The sequel after that, with the big reveal of Khan in that one, I could have done without that one. I didn't hate it, but it's like, But so, the whole Star Trek franchise, if you were to look at it like as a graph, it was like up here and down here and up here and down here and up here and down here. So there are movies I enjoyed. There are movies that I don't necessarily need to see again. What are your thoughts on the Star Trek franchise, Nick?
It's carrying Paramount right now. With their streaming service, it's
Yeah.
everything is Star Trek, whether it's animation, Lower Decks, TV series.
Did they end Picard?
Yeah, they ended Picard
Was it
mercifully.
two seasons?
It somehow got 3, and it's mercifully ended. Strange New Worlds is actually pretty. I actually like Discovery and Strange New Worlds are very entertaining shows. Lower Deck I enjoyed for animation for a while. They have a movie coming out on Section 31, which looks very intriguing to me. So I'm hoping it doesn't stink. I'll see that one.
And then there's a new series coming out, which
The Academy.
a friend of mine is going to be in. Bella Shepard is going to be one of the Academy students. So it's going to be called Starfleet Academy.
I'm very intrigued
And
by it.
yeah, I definitely will
But
check that out.
But with the movies, it was just, like I said, First Contact, and then none of them really resonated with me. And I'm with J.J. Abrams' one, he did a very subtle thing. He said, okay, we're just doing a little dimensional shift to alter the timeline. So we get to do everything over again. And I said, okay, you can tell new stories. Nope, we went back to Khan.
Yeah.
And it's Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yeah,
Playing
exactly.
Khan Union. So I'm like, how'd you get that name, buddy?
Yeah.
Because at least Ricardo Montalban back in the 60s, you could, do the semi-racist, like skin tone, like pull the eyes out. I'm like, wow, we're really doing this, huh? But okay. And then, you have to bring up Ricardo. But Benedict Cumberbatch as Khan Union. So I'm like, really? Were you adopted?
And then they built and built and built to the reveal, and then they're like, "Oh, that's Khan." That was the audience reaction. Like, really? Okay.
I think we saw that coming, JJ. Hate to say it, you're telegraphing your stuff.
Andrew, your recollections of the Star Trek franchise?
So I know I've mentioned this on here before. The only Star Trek things I've ever seen are the 2 J.J. Abrams movie, and then the third one, which is directed by, was it James Wan, I think? And the first one I liked. The second one, a little less so, but I still enjoyed it. Third one was just, okay.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you guys, should I, re-dip my toes back into the franchise, should I start with the late 60s series or start with Next Generation, or what do you think? If I were to do it.
I would say if you're, if it's a cold, snowy weekend and you're just looking to kill some time, I would start with the motion picture just to see, that transition from television to film. Have your expectations lowered a bit, but start off with the motion picture, then follow that up with The Wrath of Khan, and you would be like, okay, I get it now. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm going to defer on Joe a little bit. You don't have to do the motion picture if you don't want to, because that's a mouthful. It's there. But if you do 2, 3, and 4, 3 will be the weakest of that. But it's actually a story like a story trilogy.
And it's okay to watch those without watching the TV series.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, because you the way Wrath of Khan is, that they have a history. Like it comes across that these two guys don't like each other, and he's like, you left me on that planet to die. I'm like, well, I get it there, because that's in the TV series. Khan tries to take over the Enterprise, and then he outwits him, Kirk, and then dumps him on a planet as punishment.
Okay.
And I have to admit, I'm not, and this might be blasphemy, but I am not a fan of the original Star Trek series. To me, it's like cardboard sets and stuff like that, and rubber costumes. I liked the Hollywood motion picture elements of the movies over the cheesy Desilu Star Trek series.
But if you are going to do a series on a different time instead of movies, Deep Space Nine, Voyager they don't get talked about a lot. Deep Space Nine is one of the best series that they have out there. It's just the characters and the storylines for those like 4 or 5 seasons are just amazing.
The only complaint I have about Deep Space Nine is that it gets away, and maybe that's a good thing, but it gets away from the ongoing theme of exploration.
Yeah.
Like Voyager is kind of lost in space. It's exactly lost in space, where Voyager gets thrown into a region of the galaxy that's been completely unexplored. So everything they encounter is like new to the viewer, which is kind of exciting. Where Deep Space Nine is set in one location and people come to it. So it's a different feel than what we were used to with the Next Generation.
Yeah.
And
my friend Jeff actually had a pretty good thing. He said if you took the premise of Deep Space Nine and put it on Voyager, it would have been that would have been great. Like and then take Voyager and put it into Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
If you just actually flip them around, it'd be great.
Yeah.
You'd have like almost like the perfect series. But yeah, if you get a chance for series, Deep Space Nine and Voyager are right up there. There's certain episodes of Next Generation you kind of have to like skip through, see what are the top 10 lists on there.
Yeah. Look up the best episodes of the Next Generation, because there are some episodes that are as good, if not better, than a lot of movies you would watch in a theater.
Yeah,
with
I agree.
really epic themes about our origins and how we all come from the same source and all this stuff. There's some really, really great episodes of that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Paramount, like I said, going back to thinking about sequels, spin-offs, remakes, with Star Trek, you knew it was coming.
Yeah. Yeah, it had to, following the success of Star Wars. Let's go to another franchise from that time period. Let's talk about Superman. So,
Oh boy.
Prior to Christopher Reeve in the first Superman movie, what we had seen in live action, based on the comics, was cheesy TV stuff, and Captain America with a motorcycle helmet on his head, and cheesy Spider-Man with the swim goggles on his. And as a kid, I ate that stuff up, and of course the Batman TV show. But again, when you try to work with a big budget and you say, okay, we're going to tackle the guy, Superman.
Well, yeah, George Reeves.
The black and white,
Yeah.
the old black and white series too. But basically he would stand in one place and do this as the background move behind him. What they did with Christopher Reeve and making it look like he was flying, and it was from green screen effects or blue screen at the time to being hanging on wires and everything. It was really remarkable what they did in that first movie, and it was the first superhero movie done correctly that fans, everyone enjoyed. Like, oh, this is a good movie. The only thing I hated about the first Superman was the ending. I think the ending of the first Superman movie is one of the worst endings I've ever seen in my life. Do you know what I'm talking about with the reversal of time?
I've seen that segment of it.
Yeah, that's just, it's a cop-out. Like, you can't make Superman so all-powerful that there's no consequences of your actions. Like, it was awful.
But that is kind of the character of Superman, though. Like,
well, it depends on what era you look at, because the original premise of Superman is that he came from a different planet that had a different type of sun, and so when he arrives on Earth, our sun kind of heightened his ability. So he couldn't fly originally. He would be able to jump over a tall building, but he would land on the other side. And he had super strength and stuff like that. But then over time, they started adding to his abilities and making him more and more powerful, and then giving him the heat vision and the frosty breath and
X-ray vision.
And eventually they made him so powerful that they had to introduce kryptonite to make him vulnerable. And so I prefer a Superman that has vulnerability, and that he shouldn't be able to undo anything that we just set for 90 minutes and watched unfold. He can undo like that. And my God, Neil deGrasse Tyson must have been rolling his eyes like, that's not how the rotation of the earth works. If you change the direction of the earth, you would kill everybody on it. And so the ending, I think, is one of the worst endings I've ever seen.
But that's Richard Donner for you.
Yeah. And I loved everything up until that point. now let's go to Superman 2. Superman 2 is almost a perfect movie. He has these equal villains who can kick his ass. So now you have that vulnerability. You have Superman willing to give up everything he has so he can be with the love of his life. And so there are all these more dramatic moments in Superman 2. And then, unlike Superman 1, one of the greatest fist fights in the history of movies at the end of Superman 2. And it's a great, great movie. Now, unfortunately, as the franchise continued, they got worse and worse and worse.
I mean, 2 was a little bit absurd, too. It's like the weird kiss that erases memory. I'm like, this is not going to age well, Soups. This is not going to age well at all. And it's like the thing where she can melt the snake, but she gets bit by the snake and reacts to him. Like, it's a snake. You're a Kryptonian. It'd be like a feather hitting you. Like, why would you care?
Yeah. It's there's some flaws to it, but it's damn
better
entertaining.
than the original one. Yes. If we're saying Superman 2 more entertaining than the Superman the movie, yes.
Yeah,
that is true.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the early Superman films?
I've seen bits and pieces of the first one, but I've never seen it all the way through.
Wow.
That's it. Yeah.
Boy, oh boy, not even Superman 2.
No.
That's must see TV.
They ended up making 4 at that time.
Wow, yeah. 3 just went off a cliff, and then 4 said, "I'll hold my beer. I'll find something else." And then they did Superman Returns with Brandon Routh, and they said, "No, you hold both. I'm going to shotgun this. You hold both my beers." I'm like, oh my god.
There was a really great sequence in Superman Returns where Superman saves a plane that's falling out of the sky, and the effects and everything, the way they pulled it off was just fantastic. But then they could have rolled credits after that. Like, after that, go get yourself some snacks.
It had The Last Jedi. Like, in the crawl, they said, Superman went to go explore Krypton. I'm like, so if this is from the Richard Donner universe, Marlon Brando told you that we're dead. Long dead by the time you see this message. What? NASA told us. Oh, so NASA told you that Krypton's okay and you're going to abandon Earth and go see? Okay, that's great. And we're off to a great stop for this movie.
Yeah, so that's not worth watching. And then, they bring back Henry Cavill in the Superman movies. And I really like Henry Cavill, and I don't want to badmouth him. I thought he did a great job as Superman. The problem is that the DC Universe takes itself way too seriously, and they made these movies way too dark for a guy who flies around in a cape and his underwear on the outside of his costume or whatever. You got to have some fun with it. You got to make it lighter, but they made it so dark and tragic.
And for some reason, they kept enabling Zack Snyder.
Yeah, and they just kept handing him the reins. Like, all right, you screwed up that film. Let's give you another shot.
I was like, I didn't mind the darker turn, but if you're going to do it, then, try to at least do it. When Kevin Carson says, no, just stand there and let me die, I'm like, you could have killed him with a heart attack. That's fine, because then there's certain things that Superman cannot do.
Yeah.
He's not all powerful. Despite his powers, you can't restart a heart.
Yeah.
You're not there. But to wait, I could have literally flown at top speed. No one would have seen me. Pulled you and you would have been alive.
Yeah.
But, and then if you're going to have a bunch of Kryptonians fight, and then for him to say, I had to kill Zod and it emotionally broke me. I'm like, did you miss the thousands of people that died in the big fight?
That's
one of my
buildings. Biggest problems is they collapsed skyscrapers.
And 9/11 did on purpose. Yeah. I read that they wanted to evoke memory of like
right, but
that's kind of
weird. But if you're going to do that, you have all those innocent people died, and you're going to worry about killing one of your own at the end. I don't want Superman to kill, but buddy, have you looked around you? But if you want honesty, you can't have, and that's when you're trying to have your cake and eat it.
Yeah.
Oh, it broke me that I had to kill someone. Don't look back.
Yeah.
You're not going to like what you see when you look back.
Yeah. No, I that movie was so flawed, and as it went on and they started teaming up DC characters and stuff, they tried to lighten things up a little bit, with wasn't there a scene where Batman's down and he says something like, "Oh shit," or something, and it's like, "Oh my God, Batman just swore." So they tried to lighten it up a little bit with those movies, but a lot of those movies just made no sense. And
I think if Snyder had a chance to pursue his goal, maybe it would have been better. We don't know, but DC's trying to play catch up to Marvel.
Yeah.
Marvel laid out the groundwork, had a 5-year head start on them, and they
Yeah.
said, we want that, make it happen right now. I'm like, if you do it, you're not going to work. You can't rush this.
What makes the Marvel movies work is that they're light and fun and entertaining. And DC almost pretty much said, we don't want to be that. And it's like, you don't want to be what? Entertaining or fun or what? Like, where Marvel was light and fun, dark, or DC was just dark and pompous, and I'm just like, this doesn't work for comic book characters.
They never set on a theme. Well, it depends on which comic book. For Blade and for like the Crow, you can't have jokey and all that kind of stuff. That'd be
I
weird.
agree with you there, but Batman, Superman, these are people we've watched in cartoons, and they've always been light and goofy. Like, you don't have to make it like even when you look at Batman with Michael Keaton. Yeah, overall it had a darkness to it, but it was still fun and light and
he murdered
silly.
people in that all the time.
Yeah,
He murdered people all the time in that
Didn't
movie.
have a problem
In those movies.
Yeah.
I was like, it was like Batman doesn't kill. I'm like, really? Because he does need a gun, but he kills pretty fine with everything else.
Yeah. So of the Superman franchise, Superman 2's at the top of the heap. Everything else, Superman 1 is next, and everything else kind of pales by comparison. And I'm optimistic with this new Superman movie coming out later this year, but we'll see. I hope they don't go too far in the other direction and be too light and silly.
I'm with James Gunn. You never know. I'm going in with no expectations at this point. I don't. It's probably best not to have any, because when I saw Crypto run up there, I'm like, oh, we're bringing the dog into this. All right.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna go with no. And if I'm pleasantly surprised, Mazel Tov.
Yeah.
That's the best way to do that, because
Sure.
now we were talking about the movies that are coming up with Marvel. Marvel had this run at Endgame. They had it. They had the ball first and goal on the 1-yard line, and then decided to completely shit the bed.
Yeah, but it's like, where do you go after Endgame? Because that was like the
They brought
climax.
Well, I mean, the thing is, when you get they got the ultimate mulligan. Those stones can rewrite history.
Yeah.
So if you want to bring in a big bad villain like Doctor Doom or Galactus, and now especially now that you got the properties back at the right time, you could have done that thing where one guy has to take the bullet, kind of like what J.J. Abrams did with Star Trek. Only Leonard Nimoy knows both timelines.
Yeah,
and I'm
yeah.
stuck on here, and everything's brand new. So and Benedict Cumberbatch, Doctor Strange's like, I've seen 14 million computations, only one. I'm like, okay, then you get the burden of knowing the 18 movies before, and whatever we're going to bring with Hugh Jackman and the Fantastic Four and the mutants and all that. You're the only guy that gets to have both memories.
Yeah. And the weird thing about those Infinity Stones is if you watch the Loki TV series, some guy opens up a drawer and there's a whole bunch of them, like M&Ms in this thing, and it's like, are those Infinity Stones?
They cut the Achilles of the Marvel franchise, and when you basically open up, like they're table ornaments. I was like, oh, so we went through all that for that,
and they're paperweights in that universe.
Okay.
So
nothing matters. And since then, it's just been this. You get a couple of ups on some series or some parts, and then it just Sully wasn't there to land that in the Hudson.
Right.
Sully was not there. They face planted.
Now, I don't know if I want to go into the whole Marvel universe because,
Right.
again, that's going to take us several hours. So we may come back to it a little bit later. But some other sequels that I thought may have been better than the original one. I loved Shrek when Shrek came out. It was unlike anything we had seen up to that point. And I'm like, this is great. Then Shrek 2 comes out with Puss in Boots. And I'm like, oh, my God. This is better than the first one. I loved Shrek 2. And I saw it at the drive-in, which is a lot of fun, back at the Burton Drive-In, which is
nice
north of here.
Yeah.
And really enjoyed Shrek 2 over Shrek 1. What do you guys memories? I mean, I know they've done
love
what,
Shrek
like
2.
4 or 5.
I love the Shrek series. Well, 1, 2, and 3. Everything after that, I was starting to get a little tired of it. But
yeah, and I guess there's a new one on the horizon.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Shrek 2 was great because they also delved into the other characters. They gave the shine to some of the other characters too, and then they brought Puss in Boots. I thought Antonio Banderas was fantastic.
Sadly, I tried watching this standalone Puss in Boots movie, and I turned it off. I hated it. But he was great as part of that ensemble.
To some of our sports fans out there, that's Ben Johnson going to the Bears. Have a good time, Ben. You're going to realize that you don't have the same type of people.
Good luck going
Traitor.
Going 4-13 next year.
What's the name right now? Benedict Johnson.
That's right.
It's trending.
I saw the first 3 Shreks and I really liked them. I didn't see them like when they came out. I've just rewatched them on TV. What I get them kind of mixed up though. Like they all just kind of the story just kind of mushes together between the 3 of them. But there's the one part where the little gingerbread man, they make a huge one of him,
That's in 2, yeah.
and he like helps storm the castle. His name's Mondo or something. To me, that was so funny. I laughed out loud in that
One of
part.
the best lines in the whole Shrek franchise is just hearing the gingerbread man go, "Eat me." That just cracks me
And it
up.
spits in the face. I love that John Lithgow was the villain in the first one. He played that Lord Farquaad.
Oh, he was great
That-
at it.
And it's one of those movies or series that there's a joke every 60 seconds.
Oh, yeah.
You know, sometimes big, sometimes very subtle, but you watch it, you're going to be entertained start
Yeah.
to finish.
And you got to wonder what a different movie it might have been if they would have finished the recording sessions with Chris Farley. Chris Farley originally voiced Shrek.
Oh, really?
And he passed away before completion. And they probably could have somehow salvaged the film with what they had recorded, but they said, let's go in a different direction. They brought in Mike Myers, who decided, I guess he tried a couple different things, and then I think his dad is Scottish or
Yeah.
something like that, so he was kind of emulating his dad with that Scottish accent, and that just sort of clicked, and that's what they went with. But imagine Chris Farley just being Chris Farley as Shrek. It would have been a different vibe.
And I'll tell you right now, one of the great in the Mount Rushmore voice acting of Eddie Murphy as Donkey,
Yeah. Oh,
because
yeah.
then he's Eddie Murphy, and Eddie Murphy does Mulan with Mushu.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I put him and Robin Williams up there. Robin Williams just
Oh, sure.
by doing Genie once got it on
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Another sequel I thought surpassed the original film was Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I've only seen the first Mad Max once or twice, but I've seen The Road Warrior more times than I can count because it was a staple on cable TV in the 80s.
That became the iconic. That's the poster. And when you say
Yeah.
Mad Max, no one thinks about the original one.
You're right.
They'll actually, if you say, "Have you seen Mad Max movie?" You
Road
say
Warrior is
they're
what
talking.
you-
They think two. They just skip one and they go right
Yeah.
to like, yeah, the Road Warrior. I'm like, that's
There's,
not the first one.
there's more action,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I still
And-
haven't seen Beyond Thunderdome, though. That's the only
That's
Mad Max
forgettable. I mean,
movie I haven't seen.
Tina Turner, who's not necessarily an actress, was brought in. I don't have much interest in. I think I've seen it once, and
I'll
never
put it this
saw
way: it
again.
has Temple of Doom, like
Yeah.
funny moments, but that's about it. Like you wouldn't, as a movie,
Yeah.
you wouldn't want to go too far into it. Like Temple of Doom, I'll always have a soft spot because there's some hilarious moments in there.
Sure.
But
Now,
as a movie,
Fury Road.
Yes.
Really tried to emulate what the Road Warrior was with the long, drawn-out driving scenes and action sequences. And I don't think it holds a candle to the Road Warrior, but that's what they were going for in Fury Road. And I was kind of indifferent with Fury Road. But then I saw Furiosa, and the first 30 minutes or so of Furiosa, I was like, eh. But then I started getting into it, and I really started enjoying it. And I thought it was a nice kind of addition to that whole world, that whole franchise. But again, the best movie of the entire franchise was The Road Warrior, and it's just an absolute classic.
only George Miller could get away with telling an entirely different movie for the first 30 minutes and saying, now the movie's going to kick it up to him. Oh, okay, George.
Yeah.
Because it's you, I'll do this. Anyone else, I'm not sitting through 30 minutes. And then I'm like, where the hell's my movie?
Yeah.
So, and I just found out recently that there's a celebrity con that takes place around the country, and the one that's coming up in a month or so in Florida. Mel Gibson is going to be appearing and doing signings, and I'm like, I need to get my butt to Florida. Now, I'm not going to bring up his politics and all that stuff, but to have my Mad Max V8 Interceptor signed by Mel Gibson would be something I would display on a mantle, man. That would
I could
be
see
really
that meeting. And how are you doing? Is it Joe? Is it Mel? May I call you Mel? I just need to get that autograph, and I'll be out of here. Let's make this
cool. I
quick.
don't want to engage in conversation.
Let's make this quick. I love this version of you on here. Let's just do that.
No. Don't salute. Keep your hands down. No.
You want to grab a drink later? But no, we're good. We are good.
Now, another movie I thought surpassed the original, even though the original is a damn good movie. But in my opinion, one of the greatest movies ever made along these lines. It's Terminator 2, Judgment Day.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the first one. Again, it was unlike anything we had seen before with the time travel element and this relentless killing machine. And you're like, how can this get any better? But yeah, Cameron follows up the Terminator with T2, and it was just outstanding.
You knew you were going to get action in T2, but I wasn't expecting him to add the emotional part. Where even though it's kind of funny to hear Arnold like, I now understand why you cry, and it's like, yeah, dude, did like when he was like, it is, I must go. I'm like, oh, dude, no, Arnold, don't.
Yeah. You know what's interesting? We were just talking about this before the podcast. So I just watched for the first time an old classic movie called Ninotchka with Greta Garbo. And she meets this, I don't even know what he's supposed to be, but it takes place in Paris. Everyone had different accents, so I don't know what the hell was going on there. But as the male lead is talking to Greta Garbo's Ninotchka, he's like, there's certain things you can't do in polite society. And she's like what? And he goes, well, you're in a restaurant and you're telling the owner of the restaurant that you don't really care about food and you're insulting the man. You can't do that. And she's like, why? And he goes, well, you just can't do it. Why? And shockingly, I read after seeing that film that Arnold Schwarzenegger was instructed to watch Greta Garbo and emulate Greta Garbo in the Terminator movies. That blows my mind. And when I heard her going, why? I'm like, that kind of reminds me of Terminator.
Because
there was a direct connection.
Yeah. Well, you just can't go around killing people, shooting people in the neck. Why?
That blew my mind. So
that's now that you say it, oh my God, that's great.
Isn't that crazy? So Greta Garbo, you got to give some credit to the creation of the Terminator character.
Fantastic.
But yeah, T2 was just surpassed the first one, and I didn't hate the third one. I like the idea of bringing in a female Terminatrix in the third one, but after that, I stopped watching the Terminator movies in the series. I just had no interest in any of those movies beyond the third one.
The Terminator series with Lena Headey from Game of Thrones, Sarah Connor Chronicles, wasn't bad. I actually enjoyed that first season. I was watching. I was like, yeah, okay. I could see it.
Well, does she fight Terminators, or what's like the premise of it? I don't know anything about it.
No, it's basically because it's post Terminator, so it's
Terminator 1.
Yeah.
So this is
between
building up the resistance.
Yeah,
basically?
it's basically like she's basically trying to go like, what was she doing that got her arrested?
So it takes place between 1 and 2.
I believe so.
After 2.
I think it's after 2.
Okay. But it is worth watching, you think?
I would check it out. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If you want to, if you have time, because you have a lot of TV to watch and movies to catch up on.
Oh, thanks. I've been doing good lately, though.
You have.
Yeah, you have. You've been checking off a lot
that's
of
true.
movies.
That's true. But if you get a chance, watch the pilot if you're interested. I liked the way that because look, it's Linda Hamilton. When I saw Lena Headey standing, I'm like, ooh, you got big shoes to fill. This is scary because it's not like, because we saw the young Linda Hamilton in Terminator 1. So I'm like, yeah, but she carries it pretty well.
Yeah, yeah.
Not
You're right. Those are big shoes to fill. Another sequel that a lot of people say surpassed the original. I'm kind of on the fence because I really love the original, but I can see where they're coming from. Is the Spider-Man franchise. So Tobey Maguire, they announced he's going to play Peter Parker as Spider-Man, and I'm like, yeah, I could see that. And they did some really fantastic things in the first Spider-Man movie. I thought that the use of CGI was unnecessary in animating Spider-Man when they could have put a Cirque du Soleil guy in a Spider-Man costume and have him do the same thing. And so I thought some of that CGI was a little off-putting. But after the original Spider-Man, which I really enjoyed, and the Goblin and Willem Dafoe and all that, they do Spider-Man 2 with Doc Ock, his mentor, and it gave it, now that they've gotten the origin story and all that stuff out of the way, Spider-Man 2 was allowed to have more emotional depth, and a lot of people say that Spider-Man 2 surpassed the original Spider-Man.
I could see that.
I love him as a 1-2 punch. I love Tobey Maguire's portrayal of Peter Parker. 3 it could have been a great movie, but it's pretty widely criticized for his emo phase, Peter Parker's emo phase that he went through.
Too many villains.
It's a shame, because I would have loved to have seen that trilogy end with a showdown between Venom and Spider-Man. That would have been great, but unfortunately, it just wasn't well executed. So for me, when you look at the entire Spider-Man franchise, from Andrew Garfield to Tom Holland. For me, those first two Tobey Maguire movies are the gold standard. And I've enjoyed the Tom Holland films, but I didn't love them. I didn't embrace them. Maybe it's because I'm like, no Tobey Maguire. But then with Spider-Man No Way Home, what do? They bring back Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire. Yep. And I had to restrain myself from getting on my feet and cheering. And you can go on TikTok and see audience reactions in the theater when they bring out Andrew Garfield, then they bring out Tobey Maguire, and people lose their frickin' minds. And that shows you how much the audience cares about those original iterations of Peter Parker. But for me, it's always going to be those first two films.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? Do you prefer Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, Tom Holland?
I liked Tobey Maguire when he first came out. I didn't really care much for Andrew Garfield.
Yeah,
and for Tom Holland, it's tough for me to view it as standalone because you're part of the MCU. Like you were brought in for that thing. And Sony basically kind of said, we want to get part of that money. We'll let you play with your toy that we keep licensing every 5 years to keep the contract moving. But Toby, when they were doing it at the time, they said, well, hey, who's the guy that we got along? Because this was 1999 that Spider-Man was coming out, I think. Or was it 2000? No, 2002. 2002.
Yeah.
Because Attack of the Clones was coming out, and so they were like, "Oh, here comes Spider-Man!" Like Tobey Maguire, Kirsten Dunst, and
there was some controversy too because the original posters for Spider-Man showed the Twin Towers with a big web and all of that.
Do you remember
happened.
In the movie you could see the Twin Towers in his eye, like reflected in his eye?
Coming up and he lands on there, and I was like, "Oh, fellas, want to reshoot this?"
Do you think they put it in on purpose?
Yeah,
I was under the impression
it was an oversight, but it's kind of.
I think they did it.
Well,
on
well, remember that teaser. These movies, their pre-production is almost a year. That was 2002, so they probably did that early 2001. Remember September was in the 9th month of 2001.
The final cut.
Somebody left that out. Yeah, that was the thing in the. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. They could have done that. It was just strange.
Yeah. So I'm still hoping that Tom Holland gets to face off against Venom at some point. They sort of hinted at it in some of those movies, and like at the end of I think No Way was it? Yeah,
because you see Tom Hardy there.
Yeah.
And then they left a little drop left.
Yeah, so I was hoping that was going to hint at some sort of confrontation between the two characters, but apparently that didn't pay off in Venom.
No, that's the mouse basically saying, "We're tired of you doing this, so we're going to take a little piece of it, and then you go about it. We'll find someone to play Venom."
Yeah.
In the MCU world. You go on now. Go play.
Yeah. So we'll see. Yeah. Another sequel that is as good, if not better than the first. This is debatable. We're bringing up the name Cameron again. Aliens, the follow-up to Alien. Alien was such a great horror flick, sci-fi horror, and I watched that movie over and over and over again and again. It was something we had not seen before up to that point, and it was just spectacular. And then they're like, "Well, we're doing a sequel," and you're like, "What are you gonna do? How are you gonna do a sequel?" And they took the familiar elements that were introduced in Alien, multiplied them by 1,000, and now you have Space Marines, battling an army of alien creatures and face huggers, and an alien queen is introduced. Holy crap!
And see, I know it's called a sequel, but for me, it's almost like because you have Ripley in there. Alien is horror. Aliens is action thriller.
Yeah.
And I could like, divorce.
It's two different genres with the same elements.
That's exactly what you think of going from one director to James Cameron.
Yeah.
Ridley Scott to James Cameron.
Yeah, because Alien, when you watch it, you're scared shitless. I mean, but with Aliens, I was like, yeah, okay, I get the vibe. Like, oh, I see the egg opening because I know what's coming.
Yeah.
What I didn't know is that question. Hey, where are all these eggs coming from? Like, oh, we're gonna find out where that is. All right, cool. Let's see what's
so epic. And the one scene, if we were ever do a podcast devoted to scenes or lines, when Ripley emerges from the doors in that exoskeleton power loader, and she's like, "Get away from her, you bitch." Oh my God, that was one of the greatest movie moments of all time. And then seeing them go toe to toe as equals, man, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it.
that's one of those movies where Cameron somehow finds just a couple kernels of emotional, like when Newt hugs her and says "mommy."
Yeah.
I went, "Whoa,
Yeah.
oh my god, that that was pretty big." And then he found a way to give certain characters, like Hudson was great, rest in peace, Bill Paxton, and Frost, the actor who played Frost, had one of the best lines. Hey, we can't even shoot. What the hell do you want us to use, man? Harsh language. I love that. I love that line.
Here's one of my favorite lines.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
I love how his voice breaks. That was awesome. Yeah, it was such a great film. So, is it better or worse than Alien? I don't think either one applies. I think it was just a different genre,
that's
a
why
different movie.
That's why I can't say Aliens is better than Alien, because they're not. Yeah, exactly. Because when you go into two separate genres, it's almost you get a whole mulligan.
And then they ruin the whole thing with Alien 3.
Huh?
Where
you keep mentioning these movies I've never heard of.
Going into your deep psyche now. So here in Aliens, the sequel, here we are rooting for these people to survive, and the sole survivors are Newt and I want to say Reese, but that's a different movie. What was his character's name in Aliens? I don't remember. But we're rooting for them to survive this film. They're put into these deep freezes.
Hicks. You're talking about Hicks.
Hicks, yeah. And then Alien 3 comes out, and they're like, yeah, those two died, but we're going to move on. And I'm like, what do you mean they died? We just rooted for them through this whole previous movie, and you're going to start this next one by just saying, well, we couldn't cast the roles, or they were asking too much money, so we just killed them off. And that just started off the movie on a bad foot, and I hated everything that followed Aliens. It was just awful.
Just like that, my Costco therapy sessions are gone, too now. Thank you, Joe.
I recently watched Alien 3 for the first time.
Yeah.
And despite all the negative stuff I've heard about it, I liked it overall. I thought the story was fine. The setting was fine. I didn't like how they killed Ripley at the end, when she fell into that fire or whatever. Mm-hmm. And the CGI was horrendous.
It was the swimming alien.
Awful.
There were 3 scripts for that movie, and they were trying to meld all 3 scripts at once. I was talking to Jeff about
I can kind of see that. But directed by David Fincher, who went on to make some amazing movies.
Yeah.
But
it definitely felt like it was written by committee. Yeah.
Yeah, yep.
That never works.
Yep.
Another sequel that I thought surpassed the original was The Dark Knight. Came out in 2008, follow-up to Batman Begins, where we're introduced to Christian Bale as
best
Batman.
Comic book movie of all time.
I agree. I will not argue that The Dark Knight, with its what's the word I'm looking for, with its examination of good and evil, and how evil can, good can become evil if you give it a shove, I'm like, this is more than a comic book movie. This is like philosophy. This is deep.
But isn't that
David Nolan or Chris Nolan?
Yeah, but isn't that a dark take on a comic book character? We were just talking about, DC tried to go dark on that, and this is one of those.
Yeah, but it works.
But it's done in a fun way. Like it's dark comedy almost. Like, think about the scene with the Joker when he's like, "You want to see a magic trick?" and he sticks that pencil in the desk, and you're like, "Where's he going with this? I want to make this pencil disappear." Wham! Like, it's horrific.
Yeah. But
you're like, "Oh my God." and so it's a blast. The movie is a blast. It's not a downer. It's uplifting and makes you realize that in the end good can prevail, And so where we had to sit through a lengthy origin story with Batman Begins, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just his origin story took up most of the first movie.
Right.
The second one just gets right into Batman, and thank God they brought the Joker in and not a bunch of rogues gallery that's like just Joker versus Batman, like it's meant to be. And everyone questioned the casting of Heath Ledger, and he knocked it out of the park. Mm-hmm. And it was just so damn good. And then the follow-up, in my opinion, was a bit of a disappointment, The Dark Knight Rises, because where the second one was this philosophical take on the nature of good and evil, the third one is, well, I got a bomb and I'm going to blow up the city.
6 months later.
Well, we've seen that in James Bond movies. Like, you couldn't come up with something as deep as The Dark Knight. Like, I thought that was anticlimactic to follow up the
And
Dark
they did
Knight.
they did a
with
real
that.
big time jump there, where it's now a decrepit Batman. Like he has arthritic knees.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like, come on, Bruce, you have a Nomex suit.
Yeah.
You have Morgan. Morgan can find
Yeah.
you stuff.
Yeah, it was basically a James Bond movie where, you know, you got to James Bond has to take the bomb and take it out over the bay, and then somehow miraculously survives a nuclear explosion.
The
Oh,
Dark
man.
Knight had the best, to my mind, the best teaser. It's just the audio, and you see the Batman symbol being hit by like light beams,
Yeah,
and it's just, you know, you went after them first, sir, and then in their desperation they turned to a man they didn't understand, and then he has that. Some men can be bought, you know. Some men just want to watch the world burn. And then we got to hear Heath Ledger, and I went, oh, this movie's going to be great.
yeah, yeah, and you know, and that's the great thing about Joker's character is he. What's so terrifying about his character is he just wants chaos. He has nothing to gain. He just wants to create chaos and, like you said, watch the world burn. And that's what's so intriguing about that Batman has to face this guy who isn't necessarily robbing a bank. He's just creating chaos.
And he won. The Joker won in the end.
Yeah, turned Batman into a villain, in a way, in the eyes of the public.
I loved how Chris Nolan set up the boat. Remember, filled with people, and
Such a great
it's
scene,
two
man.
boats, right?
The convicts
Yeah.
and the
And then
regular
they
people.
both have triggers to
Yeah.
blow the other one up, and just made a huge catch-22 situation. I
Yeah.
love that.
And here you have this boat full of prisoners, and the one actor, I think his name is Tiny something. He plays the one prisoner, and he's like, "Give me the trigger. I'm going to do what you should have done a long time ago." And you're like, "Oh no, he's going to blow up the boat."
He
And
pitches.
that's not what happens. And I'm like, this movie is something else. It's
Yeah.
transcending what it's supposed to be.
Yep.
So yeah, you're right. I think it's one of the greatest comic book movies of all time, and definitely better than the source material, the origin material. So let's see. Another possible sequel that transcends the first one. I'm going to throw out Toy Story 2 and possibly Toy Story 3. Love the first Toy Story. It was the first all-computer animated feature-length film that we were introduced to in theaters, and it was great, and it was fun and funny. And then we introduced new characters in Toy Story 2 and see them venture out into the world and explore the world. But then Toy Story 3 did something to me, man. I'm like, what is this salty discharge coming from my eyes? Like, what is happening here? How can those pixels on screen do this to me? I wept in the theater watching Toy Story 3.
Jesse's song and
Oh,
so
my
number
gosh.
2. And
Yeah.
the second one, I was like, oh boy.
Yeah.
I felt bad. No, I felt
When
bad.
somebody love me. Oh,
I started thinking about my
God.
toys. I'm like, oh no.
Yeah, and thinking about the next generation who hopefully will embrace those toys and take care of them like I did when I was a kid, you know. But yeah, that whole trilogy. I think the Toy Story trilogy 1, 2, and 3. I've been seeing your therapist about Toy Story 4, but 1, 2, and 3 I think is one of the greatest trilogies of all time.
Now we have 5 coming out.
I don't
I
even
don't
know
know.
if I'm going to bother with
Yeah.
that.
At
Yeah.
some point, you just got to learn to let things go. Are we getting a prequel when how they were all made? I mean, what are we doing?
In the factory in China.
That's right.
Jeez.
So yeah, so that trilogy is just great. Let me see. I mentioned James Bond earlier. This is going to be sort of a speed session here. So anything that came out after Dr. No, which was the first James Bond film with Sean Connery,
Yeah.
came out in 1960, 2 or 3 or
62.
something like that. Everything that's come out since is technically a sequel or a reboot or a remake. I want each of you to say, what is your favorite James Bond movie? What's the best of the James Bond franchise? And if you want to rattle off a couple of them, you could do
Wow, that's asking a lot.
that. To me, it's easy. I mean, to me, there's a couple of movies that really jump out at me as the best of the franchise. And we're at what, 22 films or
Yeah.
something like that?
I love Goldfinger.
Yeah.
And-
To me, pardon the pun, is the gold standard. Goldfinger introduced all the elements of the villain, the henchman, the Bond girls, the Bond car, the Bond gadgets, the big brawl battle at the end. So Goldfinger kind of established all those unique Bond elements that you expect in every Bond film.
That wasn't the first one, was it?
No. That was the second one, I believe, or
second or third.
because there was Thunderball, but I don't know if Thunderball came before that or after that, but it was right near
And
the
then,
beginning.
I could probably find one of Roger Moore's movies that I enjoy. One of Pierce Brosnan's movies. Pierce Brosnan, I thought the first one, GoldenEye, was probably the most enjoyable one for me.
Mm-hmm.
But with Daniel Craig, I love Skyfall.
Skyfall was a masterpiece. It really was. And here's what was great about Skyfall is I love Casino Royale.
Yeah.
But basically what they were saying in Casino Royale is this is not your father's James Bond. And he got his ass kicked. He was bloodied and broken. And, Roger Moore would take a punch and shake it off and there'd be no marks on his face. Daniel Craig had bumps and scrapes and bruises. And I remember when a bartender or whatever says to James Bond, he said, I'll have a martini. He goes, shaking her shirt. He goes, I don't give a crap or whatever he says.
I don't care.
And I'm like, okay, they're kind of spitting in the face of, James Bond. And so what I love about Skyfall is after a couple of Daniel Craig movies, Skyfall comes around and they go, okay, we'll concede that this is James Bond. And when they open that garage door, when him and M are on foot running around, when they open that garage door and there's that Aston Martin and you hear dun 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 dun, I was like, oh my God, it's the Aston Martin. They finally gave the fan service to the fans and said, all right, here's your little.
He flips the switch. Go ahead, eject me. See if I care.
So Skyfall is probably top 3 for me. Goldfinger is number 1 because, like I said, it sets the standard. For me, because of the era that I grew up in, I grew up with Roger Moore, who I enjoyed. In hindsight, I see that Connery was James Bond. But I grew up with Roger Moore. And for me, the best Roger Moore film was The Spy Who Loved Me. Introduced Jaws. You got the white Lotus Esprit that drives off a dock into the water and converts into a submarine, for God's sake. That was epic. That was amazing. So that movie was my favorite Roger Moore movie, and he began to quickly age out of that role, but they kept sticking with him through For Your Eyes Only and A View to a Kill, and it's like, okay, Roger, it's time for the next one. So Timothy Dalton, I don't even really discuss Timothy Dalton. I didn't enjoy his films. Pierce Brosnan came in, and they did some really silly stuff with the Brosnan movies, but I enjoyed them. I like the action flicks with Michelle Yeoh. They did one of the movies together. I forget what the name of it was, but that was an enjoyable.
Tomorrow Never Dies.
Tomorrow Never Dies. And then Halle Berry is introduced in Die Another Day with the invisible Aston Martin, which I thought was kind of corny but fun. So for me, my top 3 would be Goldfinger, The Spy Who Loved Me, and Skyfall are my top 3. Andrew, how many James Bond movies have you seen?
I've seen probably around half of them.
Oh, okay.
Maybe a little more than half. Of course, I've seen all the Pierce Brosnan ones.
Andrew ruined my parlay. He said he saw half. I was going to 25%.
There was a time, probably 12 years ago or so, where I started watching a good chunk of them. I think I watched all the Sean Connery ones. I have not seen the very last one with Daniel Craig. I haven't seen that.
Okay.
But Casino Royale and Skyfall.
Yeah.
Were really good.
Yeah,
Seeing
they're
Casino Royale 2006 or whatever in the theater was excellent.
Oh, it was great.
Absolutely. But like you said, it was a very different James Bond.
And I was like,
and that's,
yeah,
to me, that's fine. It's like, I think it's okay to shake up a 45-year-old franchise at that time.
Sure.
And they do something a little different with it.
When the guy from Layer Cake playing James Bond, when the guy from Layer Cake is playing James Bond,
well,
really?
You know what I only had known Daniel Craig from at the time was Road to Perdition. He played a psychotic villain in Road to
that's right.
Perdition, and I'm like, you're gonna have this actor who played a villain play James Bond? And
Which is that Jude Law was really
so wrong.
Yeah, Jude Law in Road to Perdition.
Yeah, he was the photographer
Yeah.
villain dude. Yeah.
Yeah, Daniel Craig was like the son of the mobster or whatever, and yeah. So I was so wrong about Daniel Craig. I thought he was suave and debonair and really embodied a rugged James Bond.
Let's hoping the new Bond is good. That was Aaron Taylor Johnson. Is that it?
Yeah,
They haven't.
That's not official.
No,
I thought it was.
See,
I
see
think he
here's the
is.
thing. My buddy at work said it was official too, but I looked it up.
Yeah.
It's like, no, there was just so much internet buzz
Yeah.
at the time about it.
Now, is he British? Is Aaron Taylor Johnson British?
I don't think so.
Because I will not see a James Bond movie that doesn't have a British actor in it. It would be blasphemy.
Roger Moore? Come on.
He's British.
I thought he was American.
No, Roger Moore. He was the Saint. He was a British actor.
I don't remember him having an accent.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No.
I'm sorry.
Whoa. No. He's full on British.
Yeah.
But in what I would say is, you know what? F the British. They deserve it. You know how many of their guys have played our iconic characters? It's about time.
That's
they
a pet peeve
they
of mine.
threw a hissy fit when Robert Downey Jr. was playing Sherlock.
Oh, right. Yeah. So, speaking of other, let's throw out some other quick lightning round stuff. Best Harry Potter movie.
3.
Prisoner of Azkaban. I agree.
I watched the first 3 with my ex, made me watch them. I guess 3. I don't remember them. I know Alfonso Cuarón did that.
Yeah. And it had that
he's-
time travel element where they used the time turner to go
Which
back
is,
in time,
you
which is
know,
absolutely brilliant.
I just like that they were becoming more. It was taking a darker, like they were becoming grown in this world. Because I always love the first one, John Williams. It's the first iconic, the first time they go through Diagon Alley and all that stuff. But
Yeah. Another franchise that seemed to get better with each film was the Lord of the Rings franchise, which capped off with Return of the King, which swept the Oscars. And, oh, my God. Right? Return of the King was the third one.
It swept, and
Two Towers was the second one.
It didn't necessarily have to. There were some categories where it should not have won, but it was payback because they screwed him in Fellowship and Two Towers. So we just have to give. They
were
we
due.
can't deny it. Yeah.
So the Return of the King, obviously one of the greatest movies ever made, and so each one of those installments. Where to me the second one was just sort of a flat out action flick, which was fine, but Return of the King was just another masterpiece.
The fact that Viggo Mortensen and Sir Ian McKellen left that trilogy without an Oscar is criminal.
Okay. And the only other franchise that really comes to mind, we touched on it earlier, the Marvel franchise. What would you say are some of the best entries to the Marvel Universe franchise? Let's say from Iron Man to Endgame. Let's stay within that 10-year period. What would you say are the superior films in that 10-year window?
Winter Soldier and the first Avengers movie.
Okay.
Those stand out to me. I love those both.
Yeah.
The first Captain America movie, the first
loved
one,
it. Yeah.
directed by Joe Johnston.
No relation.
Of course, Endgame was just a crazy good climax.
Even though I prefer Infinity War over Endgame, even though Endgame had some great moments, but Infinity War, that ending was a gut punch. We had never seen anything like that. Like, what just happened? What?
Yeah, and you watch those two movies a year apart, and then you say, you see that Marvel is, we still have 12 more movies on the horizon. You're like, where are we going from here? And we still don't know where we're going from here.
Yeah.
But hopefully they're bringing back the Russo brothers to direct.
Was it Thunderbolts?
That's already made. The next Avengers.
Oh,
movies.
okay.
Okay.
2 of them. We'll see. Fantastic Four. Maybe somebody can get it right.
Yeah.
The cast. The
Not
cast.
a great track record.
The cast is great though.
Yeah.
We'll see how Thunderbolts and the new Captain America movie that comes out next month. So we'll see how that goes.
For me, again, the movie that launched the entire MCU as we know it is Iron Man. So that's always going to be like on my Mount Rushmore of Marvel movies. Iron Man was just such a revelation and such a masterpiece. And Jon Favreau just did amazing things with, casting Robert Jr. perfectly cast. I can't hardly envision anyone else playing that role. So Iron Man's on my Mount Rushmore. I also love Captain America, the first one. I do think that Winter Soldier, Winter Soldier, that's the one with Robert Redford and everything.
Mm-hmm.
The story in that was just great. It's just awesome. Like, you forget you're watching a comic book movie. This was like serious drama. Like, it was really,
It's like a
really
spy
great
thriller.
about betrayal and trusting your government and being betrayed by your government. I don't know if you guys can relate to that. But so those are up there. I did really love the first Avengers movie because I'm like, how are you going to pull this off with this ensemble cast?
Yeah.
You introduced each one of these characters, and now you're putting them all in the same movie. How are you going to pull this off? And they did,
Yes.
which is incredible, and it was funny and action-packed and just great.
I was going to say, for the 20th Century Fox, the X-Men movies, I was just going to say real quick, X-Men First Class as a prequel, I thought was really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I know
then
that.
Logan is
those two movies really stand out for me for the whole X-Men
Logan
saga.
was, I mean, I could see with the X. I was like, Logan was such a depressing movie.
Yeah,
But Daphne Keane, I'm
Yeah.
surprised she didn't get an Oscar nomination for that.
Yeah.
Now, as far as I liked First Class, but I actually liked Days of Future Past better because of that time travel element and Logan going back in time and stuff. I really enjoyed that storyline. But a lot of people, when you look at the earlier X-Men movies, a lot of people loved X2. I enjoyed the first X-Men, but a lot of critics preferred X2 over the first one. It was pretty damn entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
So I think those are. I was going to throw out John Wick. I've enjoyed the John Wick franchise. I think each one has been enormously entertaining.
That man had a bad month.
Don't mess with the man's dog. But I think that pretty much makes up all of my sequels. We didn't even really get into remakes and reboots. We'll see. But any sequels I'm leaving out, any sequels that really jump out to you guys as that surpass the original or worthy of mentioning?
I'll say it. I love Back to the Future 2 more than Back to the Future 1.
Interesting.
Me too.
I don't think
But-
I agree with that.
Like Empire Strikes Back, I saw 2 before I saw the first Back to the Future.
My God, man.
So
Back to the Future 2 is iconic. It's epic. It introduced a lot of great things to the franchise, like the hoverboard and all that stuff. But it got really, really dark. Like Temple of Doom, it got uncomfortably dark, where like Biff was like smacking Lorraine around, like, what's going on here? So that's my only real gripe about Back to the Future 2 is it got really super dark.
Kind of predicted the future, too, with
Yeah.
a certain billionaire.
yeah.
And then part 3, I enjoyed part 3, but it was just a simple Western. I think they could have gotten a little bit more creative with Back to the Future 3 instead of just setting the entire film in the Old West. It's entertaining.
I
but
can see them remaking that only after Michael and Chris are gone.
Yeah. We'll see. People are asking for it. And Bob Gale, who, is a co-creator, him and Bob Zemeckis, he's adamant that as long as he's alive, there'll never be another Back to the Future film. But who's to say what the future of the franchise is? But for me, and we've talked about this, Back to the Future to me is my top 3 greatest films ever made.
Yeah.
Seeing it in the theater for the first time just blew my mind. Like, what is going on here? So for me, it's always going to be Back to the Future. But I can see Back to the Future 2, people saying, it had so many iconic
But
elements.
it's like Terminator 2 and Terminator. Like they're both.
Yeah. Neck and neck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a photo finish.
Well, I
Andrew, anything you want to throw out?
One last thing. And I think Nick said he's watched it. I can't remember if you said you've watched it, Joe, but Blade Runner 2049?
Haven't seen it.
Nick, you agree with me on this,
That's
right?
one I need to sit down and
I
give
have
it a
the
chance.
Blu-ray if you want to borrow the Blu-ray.
If you drop it off, I'll watch it.
It is so good.
Yeah.
Joe. It is excellent.
I guess my problem is I enjoy the first one. I don't think it's the masterpiece that everyone says it is. To me, it's kind of a simple noir film. And I enjoy it, but because I didn't love Blade Runner, I had no interest in seeing the follow-up.
So it's one of those rare instances, I think, and they took, 40 years in between almost, that the sequel is better. There's more action. There's more the story is much wider.
Yeah.
In my opinion. What's his name? Gosling.
Yeah.
Reminds me of his character in Drive.
Oh, okay.
He plays pretty
Yeah.
very similar character.
Yeah. Now when you say that,
The cast is great. You see a computer-generated Ana de Armas as his girlfriend,
Yeah, yeah.
which is brilliant. When you
I
see it, you'll know what I'm
I think
talking
that's the
about.
first movie I saw her in.
Yes, me too.
Huh, yeah.
Um,
She's got the ballerina movie coming out later, yeah.
Yeah.
it's directed by the same guy who's done the Dune movies, and he did Arrival.
Denis Villeneuve. Yeah.
Yeah.
It on a technical level, it is flawless. It
Uh-huh.
is gorgeous. It's got Hans Zimmer doing the score. I'm pretty sure Roger Deakins did the cinematography. It is beautiful.
All right.
It's dark, but it is excellent.
I mean, Blade Runner wasn't a sunny movie to start off.
Right.
There is one movie we have to throw out because I feel like there's going to be a group of film critics led by Bob Butler with torches out front if we don't mention this. But most critics would probably agree that Godfather 2
I was gonna
is
say
the
that.
greatest sequel ever made. I personally prefer Godfather 1 over Godfather 2, but it won Academy Awards and it furthered that story. And so we can't end a podcast about sequels without mentioning Godfather 2. It would be irresponsible of us to do that.
Sure.
So most people would agree it's the greatest sequel ever made. How do you guys rank Godfather 2?
2 better than 1.
Yeah, you like 2 better than 1?
I've only seen each one twice, more than 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So I'd have to rewatch them to accurately say
Yeah,
that.
they're worth a rewatch.
Yeah, I definitely need to rewatch. I never saw 3, and I heard it wasn't that great. But
I tried watching
What movie?
They re-released it on DVD. Like they gave it like a director's cut on DVD a few years ago, and I tried to sit down and watch it, and I couldn't get through it. Part 3 is almost unwatchable
You
in
guys
my
keep mentioning
opinion.
these movies and doing this podcast. I have no idea what the hell you're talking about.
But having revisited The Godfather and Godfather 2 just a year or so ago, what I love about Godfather 1 is it's just a self-contained movie that tells a story from beginning to end, and we watch the arc that Michael Corleone goes through and how he becomes hardened and bittered by the events in the first one. What bothered me about Godfather 2 is it could have been 2 movies. The origin story of
I see that.
Vito and the further adventures of Michael, and they sort of jumped back and forth between those 2 stories, and each one was compelling on its own, and I felt like they were sort of shoehorned in together. I would have loved to have seen, say, the Michael Corleone part be Godfather Part 2, and then Godfather Part 3 being the Vito Corleone origin story. To me, that would have been great. That's my only gripe, and I'm sure there are people hurting themselves, rolling their eyes right now, like, what the hell you know? But both of those movies are 2 of the greatest movies ever made. But I just like the self-contained story of The Godfather. Plus, I saw it when I was 5 years old. Come on.
Yeah, that might also.
Are you looking for the next Godfather sequel starring Glenn Powell? Directed by Zack Snyder? No, I'm joking.
You put that out into the universe, and it's going to happen.
Hey,
I keep
my
telling you.
phone is recording it and sending it directly to Hollywood.
You keep messing around, Andrew, and it's going to happen, and I'm going to look right at you.
I have a list of remakes and reboots, but I don't know if I necessarily.
Yeah, that's that.
We might have to save that for another
When you
time.
mentioned the topic today was remakes, reboots, I'm like, we're only going to get through 1 R. And what or
Sequels,
actually, yeah,
prequels, everything.
Yeah. So we'll revisit reboots and remakes. I mentioned on the last podcast the sequel that I'm looking forward to the most this year is Paddington 2. I sent you guys. Did you guys watch the little clip that I sent you?
I saw the first few seconds.
There's
of it,
like 2 guys, and the one guy's trying to convince the other guy how great Paddington 2 is, and he's like, "Come on, man, what is this Paddington? What?" And then there's an edit where they just finished the movie, and he's like, "That was great, man." And I'm like, "I know, right?" So 100% Rotten Tomatoes, man.
Again with this, I'm telling you, now I feel like I'm being trolled.
All right. Any final thoughts before we go to our closing theme song?
No, I realized I have to go get a lot of therapy redone, but yeah, I'm good.
You got to go see the Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind guy again.
Yeah, I will have
Get
to.
those parts of your brain erased.
Or the Men in Black.
Yeah, somebody flashing thing me, and then what's going to happen is I get flashed, and it's not the thing I'm thinking about.
All right, guys, great conversation. Thanks for joining me as always, and thanks to you at home for listening. And hope you enjoyed this. And
Stay warm out there, everybody.
yeah, and our thoughts to the people in California who are
Absolutely.
experiencing tragic loss right now. And we will see you next time.
Oh, I do want to give a shout out
Yes.
to our friend Ira.
Oh,
who
yeah.
passed
Yeah,
away.
go
He was
ahead,
a
take
friend
a
at
second.
ONTV. Yeah, Ira Bellion is one of the founding members of Imaginos Workshop and a great friend at ONTV. Did a lot of projects here. Did
Yep.
stuff with Andrew and
Yep.
took some of the classes that you guys offer that Joe teaches, which is excellent if you get a chance to do it. I recommend it.
Please.
Yeah, I looked up at a TV monitor today, and there he was on the TV screen today. He was a guest on a recent show here. in
Passed away
Nashville.
recently in a car accident, so we'll love and miss him. And so shout out to Ira.
Yep.
Yep.
All right. Thanks for mentioning.
Thank you, Joe.
All right. We'll see you in a couple of weeks on Hollywood Blockbusters.
Come to the movies, watch Charlie Chaplin, and put some sunshine into your day. Forget the hard times, come to the movies, and try to laugh your troubles away.